Welcome everyone who's here. I am super excited to kind of share what Carrie, Jermaine, and I have been working on regarding kind of 9th through 12th programming at Safety Harbor. And as I said, I'll try to make this brief just so that we have plenty of time for questions. Quick kind of rundown of what I'll talk about. I'll first give a little information about my own background and kind of why I'm helping out with the creation of this high school program. Then I'll shift more into the overview of key things that we kept in mind while developing it that's kind of consistent across all the schools that we as Galileo own. I'll go a little more into detail about the curriculum that we're kind of thinking of building for this high school program. And then of course, time for questions at the end. So a tiny bit about me. I've been in kind of high school and K through 12 education for quite some time now. About a decade ago, I founded a college advising company. I'd like going to college, and so I was like, might as well do this. This will be a fun project. And in the process of doing that, learned a whole lot about not only high school, but also just kind of the full K to 12 education spectrum. And when I would work with some of my students for college advising, I would realize, what things were going really well in their schools and what things maybe were actually a detriment to them as they were applying to college. And so I was kind of eager to take that and scale it a little bit more. So in the years since then, I've worked at building curriculum and programming for a number of different, both K through 12 school programs, as well as after school programs and some summer camps. Recently, about 9-10 months ago, I was hired by Galileo to help build on high school programs to some of the schools that we're acquiring, in addition to just providing as much support as I can for curriculum and other parts of their existing program. And so it has been super exciting to get to meet the team at Safety Harbor. I've met, a lot of the students there. I visited a few months ago. And I'm really excited about the vision to be able to build on to the K through 8 program that you guys, or I guess even younger than K, but the program that you guys have. And, if a family wants that seamless educational experience where their children can kind of keep going after those middle school years, I'm excited to be able to offer that, of course, with the help of the Safety Harbor team who knows your guys' needs and the students' needs much better than I do. So it's been a great partnership, and I'm excited to share a bit more about what we've come up with so far. So kind of overview of this, and before I get too much into the weeds and the details, I want to make one thing clear, that this will be the first year that we are having any kind of high school program at Safety Harbor. And so we are really open to feedback and suggestions and what's working, what's not working. Nothing is set in stone permanently. I mean, some of the things we have to do for the state of Florida, but for the most part, we want to make sure that the program is meeting the needs of your students and what they want. And we don't want it to feel like this jarring shift from, the pre-K to 8. And instead, it should feel like more of a seamless transition that is preparing the learners for whatever their post-graduation plans are. And so, we've brainstormed, we put together what we think will be the best option for that, but it won't be perfect. And, it's something that we're excited to have input on. And as potentially some of the founding families one day, we're excited to make changes as needed while also being really firmly belief in what we're doing with these kind of program tenets. So the guiding principles, I would say, that we were thinking about when creating this program and other programs kind of through Galileo. One thing that kind of defines what Galileo does is that it's self-paced and mixed age. Those are two things that we feel is really helpful in the new century of education. So much of the high school curriculum will be self-paced. So, we don't want learners to feel like they're struggling to keep up, but we also don't want learners to be bored if the content they're learning is simple for them and they don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time on it. And so especially with high school curriculum where there's so much content, we're excited to be able to offer something that they can kind of take at their own pace in a way that feels comfortable to them. And that mixed age grouping is also really important to us. It's key to Montessori, but it's also key just to learning how to work in the world, to having leadership opportunities, to having mentorship opportunities. And that's something that we want to make sure we're preserving through the high school program as well. Collaboration kind of ties hand in hand to that. When you have self-paced learning, sometimes it can feel difficult to, include enough collaboration in there too, because those are sometimes mutually exclusive. But, I've worked with Jermaine and Carrie to really think through how we can keep all of that kind of at the top of the program that we're creating. And just a few more things that have kind of guided us along the way. We think customization of the program is really important. That's something I see a lot when I work with students through the college application process, is that everybody's high school journey is going to look really different. Some people are going to want to go to college for, let's say, study biology. Some people have no interest in college, and maybe there's a family business and they want, to develop entrepreneurial and business skills in order to, succeed in that realm. Maybe someone wants to join the military. Someone, there's so many different paths after graduation. And so the more customized we can make the high school program, the better set learners will be when they start those post-graduation plans. Future-oriented kind of ties hand in hand to that as well, where we realize that a lot of the things that are being taught in high school are really necessary for whatever's going to come next. And so in choosing curriculum and choosing courses and all of that, I think the applicability to the real world is kind of at the forefront of decisions, because at the end of the day, I think high school is sort of a launch point for whatever's going to come next for a learner. And so that's going to be really tied into the day-to-day at the high school level, just because that's a big part of high school. Service-minded and enriching, I think, kind of go together in some ways too. Academics are important, arguably one of the most important pieces of the high school model, but so are the other components of how to be a good person, how to understand the world around you better, how to treat others with respect. And, I think you can learn everything in a textbook, but you can't learn those things without actually going out to the community and working with your peers and serving others around you. And so, while academics will certainly be a priority, so will those other kind of soft skills and giving back and just interfacing with the world as much as we possibly can. And so kind of keeping those as the pinnacle of, what curriculum do we choose? How do we structure the day? I've talked with Carrie, I've talked with Jermaine, I've talked with Rich as well to kind of see, what curriculum would make sense with those goals. And that will feel, again, in many ways seamless to what learners are currently doing, let's say in Safety Harbor's middle school program. And so I wanted to kind of give a little diagram of what the school day in terms of timing would look like. The main core academic coursework program would be something called Imagine Learning. And I'll go more into detail about what that is in a few slides. But so that'll take up a little less than, I would say, half the day. And that is the kind of core classes that colleges are looking for, the state of Florida is looking for in order to, for graduation diplomas and all of that sort of thing. And, things like math, reading, English, history, science, all of those. A smaller portion of that day will go towards more elective and CTE coursework. CTE, for those of you who don't have high school students right now, is career and technical education. And so this is really in line with that sort of future-minded goal we have with the program where, instead of just learning calculus or instead of just learning Algebra 1, let's say, we're also taking classes that are really applicable to whatever field we hope to go into, whether that's, the health sciences, whether that's education, whether that's business. And it increases that kind of applicability to the real world, which I think makes everyone feel like the time they're spending at high school is time well spent. And then kind of, as I mentioned before, we want to make sure that there's plenty of social and collaborative time, because that is, social skills are so important, and high school is such an important time to build on those skills and have mentorship from teachers and other peers. And so almost half the day we hope to have dedicated to kind of cultivating the culture of the program, plenty of group activities, social activities, and even academically working together on some of the parts of the curriculum, so that there's a lot of give and take and everyone's kind of learning from everyone else. So again, that kind of slightly less than half chunk of Imagine Learning, as I mentioned, is that core curriculum that's going to make sure that all students can take the courses needed to get a diploma in the state of Florida. In many cases, students might actually exceed what Florida's expectations are, but we want to make sure that everyone going through the program is at least hitting that kind of baseline expectation from the state of Florida. I've chosen Imagine Learning, and it's a program we use at kind of our flagship school in Nashville, Tennessee, for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, I think it has such a broad range of courses available for students to take. A lot of programs out there might have one science class that fits whatever the state requires, or one math class. And it was important that there were options that, if someone wants to take an AP level of that course, they have the resources to do so. Maybe, let's say someone's not interested in earth science and they want to take a different kind of science that still fits what the state of Florida allows. The more choices I just think are better for people pursuing whatever their passions are. Coupled with kind of lots of courses at different levels. There's also test prep for most national like standardized tests like SAT, ACT, which if someone is looking for kind of the college level, that comes in handy, and having that resource available in a format that students are familiar with is really helpful. 5 different foreign languages are offered, which again, flexibility, customization, depending on a child's individual desires and post-graduation goals. All of the science courses include labs, which is not a super common element of many of these curricular programs. They might have labs for 1 or 2, but the state of Florida requires labs for the science courses. And so this just essentially means that, they'll have access to all of the science options in order to meet their graduation requirements, since those labs are included. And then something parents tend to like is there's either daily, weekly, or I think actually monthly options where the program will email parents and give an update on, okay, of the courses that your child's taking, here how they're doing in those courses. Here's their pacing calendar. Are they ahead? Are they behind? Do they need to spend more time working on a given subject? And parents can sometimes feel left in the dark when students are taking lots of classes, maybe the parent's not helping with homework anymore. And this really gives a way, and a very easy way, for parents to be really in tune, if they want to be, with progress their children are making, and maybe be able to have conversations about, hey, I noticed this in this class. How's it going? What's going on? So the parents at our Franklin location in Tennessee really do like that part. So in addition to that kind of core curriculum program, the Imagine Learning program, as I'd mentioned, we really want to make sure that we're holding on to that collaborative social learning component that I think is really key to any good and enriching high school program. And so Carrie and Jermaine and I talked through, what are some key ways we can keep that in while still making sure learners have enough time to, do their core courses and prepare for whatever's going to come after high school. And so, lots of group-based writing opportunities, apprenticeship instruction, which is something we do at our current school location, and is really, it just walks learners through in a group setting, all the skills they need in order to go out in the world and do an internship, volunteer, get a job, things like building a resume, things like interview skills, even something as simple as them figuring out what their interests and strengths are, and how could that correlate to jobs out in the world, and of those jobs, what would that look like? Might they be excited about those options? Something that is already part, for those of you who are currently at Safety Harbor, kind of keeping with the Friday elective ideas, where they have the opportunity to go out in the community at times and just pursue interests that they have as a group. The annual adventure trip, which I've heard really great things about, we want to make sure that option remains open to the high school program as well. In addition to the clubs, the specials, these are pieces that are kind of already part of the school day that we want to make sure are preserved through the high school level. Community service, again, I think the idea of giving back and remembering that life is about more than just ourselves is really paramount, especially in high school. And so maintaining that. And then, of course, mentorship opportunities. I think as the oldest group in the school, there is going to be so many opportunities for those older learners to work with middle schoolers, even to work with, upper L, lower L, and help them, grow and mature and develop. And I think it could be really enriching in both directions, both for the younger learners and for the older learners, as kind of the heads of schools in a sense. And so kind of that final piece, which was the smallest part of the pie chart, is the elective and CTE, or career and technical education courses. Florida has requirements for elective kind of career ready courses, and this absolutely aligns with that. With this program, eDynamic Learning, again, this is something that we use at our current location in Nashville, Tennessee, but there are so many different courses available depending on what a learner might be interested in. Some of them might be in preparation for careers that require higher education. So, let's say the health sciences. Obviously, they're not going to finish that and become a doctor right away, but it will prepare them to excel in their coursework once they get to their higher education level. It will give them kind of, a glimpse into what life would look like. But then on the flip side, there's a lot of jobs out there that don't necessarily require a high school or a college education. And some of these courses will actually prepare for career certification in different industries. And so, a student who has an interest in something that doesn't necessarily require college college could get career certified by the time they finish high school through this framework and be ready and job ready after graduation. And so, no matter what end goal is, there are tons of different pathways that cover a lot of different career options and areas of interest. And so kind of taken together with this e-dynamic learning platform, which is kind of the elective, real life applicable career courses, with that Imagine Learning, which is very much geared toward making sure that all the core courses are being covered, math, science, writing, all of that. And then kind of bringing those two together with a really dynamic and engaging social element. I think Carrie, Jermaine, and I all feel that will maximize what we can offer while preserving, things like self-paced learning, preserving things like community, and making sure that learners leave the program ready for whatever is kind of the next step of their life and whatever they're excited to tackle next. And I think the next slide is questions. I know that was a pretty brief overview, but I'm happy to kind of dive more into the weeds if people have questions about specific parts of the programs that I mentioned or kind of other elements that we've thought through as we've been developing this program. And if Carrie and Jermaine, if you guys want to add anything either, feel free to. I know we're still working through some of the minute details, but we've been, I think, making great progress so far.
How much of the day right now is parsed out between the online piece and everything else? Like, is there a requirement that, because homeschooling's a little different, the curriculum today, even at Safety Harbor, is a little different, right, in terms of how the day's structured. Is there a structure to the online piece where it's all done at, one time in the morning, in the afternoon? How does that work?
Yeah, so what I kind of envision is a general structure of, maybe for this amount of time in the morning, let's work on our core courses. But let's say a learner moves through quickly what they need to get done, then maybe them and anyone else who's moved through quickly might go off and do something differently. Because of the self-paced nature, everyone's working at slightly different times on what they need to get done for a given day. So I imagine them kind of having some degree of autonomy to say, okay, I need to work on this. Oh, now I'm done. Now I can go off and do perhaps like a more fun activity or a group activity.
And so if somebody is done and can move ahead, if you have, like, we have a kiddo that really likes school and she'll move forward, there'll be options to keep them busy if they're done with that online portion. And then likewise, I guess on the flip side, is there a form of proctorship or some guidance to keep the students on track? If you have a student that's like, oh yeah, I did my math, I don't really want to go on to my next thing. Is that going to be basically like supervised online, learning?
Absolutely, yes. So there would be at least one guide at all times in the space, and also for questions that come up too. So, we have two guides right now with the high school learners who use the program, and between the two of them, they kind of are able to answer all the questions while also making sure people stay on track. The learners every day will get a pacing calendar, so it'll show them, all right, here's what needs to happen today, and if they're goofing off, if they're not, on track, the guide might come over, the teacher might come over and say, all right, let's look at your pacing calendar. What have you finished? Oh, maybe we should be working on this. And, it's necessary. Eventually they learn the skills, but it can be a little overwhelming at first and distracting when you're, in high school and social life is all the rage.
Sorry, I had one more question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I'll ask after.
The entrepreneur piece that is there right now for like the grades that are in place where, they do the store or they do the, what do you call the formal name of it? Where they're selling things, making things. Is that going to carry through to high school in some way, or is that going to be part of the mentorship piece? I like that piece. I just want to make sure that like entrepreneur spirit keeps up through the high school portion.
Yeah, when Jermaine, Carrie, and I had kind of talked through what they do in the current middle school, I loved that piece of it. It sounds like that goes really well and everyone really enjoys it. So we definitely envision that continuing to. Whether that begins as them working in collaboration with the middle schoolers and kind of serving as mentors, it might be a numbers game where that's how it starts. But then, eventually as the high school grows, then they might be doing their own thing. So either way, that will definitely be a component. Because I think the life skills you learn from things like that are invaluable.
In the past, some things that we've done, we've had our middle school run a hot lunch program. Um, with the new rules for the health department, we have to switch that up a little bit, but also our kids have run a school store. Sometimes, they use that money to do something special at the end of the year, but they learn things like customer service. They learn what happens when a customer's unhappy and they need to, work through a problem. They learn to talk to vendors, to test out products. In the past, we've had parents come in who are business owners to help them work through some of those things that they would be doing in real life. So those are the kinds of things that we want to continue with our high school program as well. And like Sarah said, it might start off where they are working in conjunction with the middle school kids, but as this program grows, it might separate out and maybe the high school kids take on a project that's exciting to just them. Did that answer the question? Was that Maria who asked?
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great. Patrick, did you want to go next?
Sure. So I obviously, all brand new. But you guys are looking to the future. What are your thoughts on class sizes and like how expansive is that going to be? I know it's starting with ninth grade, but I'm not sure what you're envisioning for each class.
Well, in Montessori classrooms, typically the seventh, eighth, and ninth graders are together. So I think that next year it will lend itself really well to combining those ages together. Um, as we grow, we'll have to, reconsider space. But the kids are moving back to the big space. If you have children at our school, we have that one area with basically the 3 rooms. In one, we have the science lab. We have what we call a quiet room, which is a small room between the two where kids can go if they need a little more privacy or if a teacher's giving a small lesson. And then we have the bigger room with the risers that lends itself well to the group meetings. So space-wise, that's what we're using next year. But as we grow, we have architects coming in to tell us what we can do on the current property without taking away all the green space and things like that. Or, we've even talked about, considering if we had to have another space for high school. So we want to maintain, what we do currently. We always, kids have enough space. I think it just helps with behavior. It helps feel good if everybody has enough room, has what they need. And we're also going to be, modernizing that space, adding some really cool furniture. I was able to go to Galileo's school in Tennessee, and they have, little pod areas where I think the kids enjoy, going and working. Just some furniture I think, makes the space feel good, makes it feel really grown up and clean and fresh. So, in talking about the space, we're doing those things as well.
And in terms of teacher kind of ratios and just skill sets and things like that, at our current location in Franklin, ideally the goal is to have, someone who's an expert in the sciences, someone who's an expert in math, and someone who's an expert in writing with the high school learners, because those are really the 3 tricky subject areas that a lot of questions come up where feedback is super helpful, especially for like editing, writing, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the goal is to make sure at least those 3 people, if there's 3 children in the program, it's unlikely that we would start with 3 guides managing, but once there's a reasonable size, that's kind of what I envision as the support for that group, just because otherwise I think that can like compromise the quality of their learning and the feedback as a result.
So that would be per level, or they would kind of be floaters? How would that, like, what are you guys envisioning?
Right now our high school is kind of in one room. It's like one group. We have 9 through 12 together. And so they would all be in there with, all the learners. Most of the time it would be applicable all the way 9 through 12. So, the math person would be hired to know, 9th grade math, 10th grade math, 11th and 12th grade math. Same with science, same with writing, so that they'd be able to help, anyone in that space.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, from a technology perspective, how are you envisioning, resource availability for students? So computer labs, STEM equipment, things along those lines.
I don't fully know what's available right now, so I will just speak to what would be needed, which is, everyone would have a Chromebook or other learning device that, could depend on what Carrie and Jermaine think makes sense. But at Galileo, we let learners take those home and then they bring them back the next day. Sometimes, schools have them stay there and then they have a different version at home. Either way, we'd make sure that there's a Chromebook or other laptop device for them each day. And then whatever is needed for science would be provided. So, we'd make sure that nothing would be hindering their learning from a technology and research perspective. I don't know if that answers kind of what you're wondering, or Carrie and Jermaine, I don't know what your current resources are and how that's different, but
all the kids would have their own Chromebooks to use at school.
And I think for science, we also talk about doing that, the labs in person. So not necessarily will that be on the computer. And the same with the foreign language. So we'd like to have that a little more in person, at least one of the languages.
Do you think there would be opportunities, and I'm just thinking about it from, coming from a smaller school, just having resource availability, even beyond Chromebooks. So when I think about a big high school and kind of the preparation that, whether kids choose to go the college route or they choose to go into a technical field, the understanding of just all the technology available. And obviously there's a ton, but to hone it in specifically what a college or your first job would have expectations around. So obviously computer skills, but even beyond that, and I'll have to think of some creative examples, but just wondering if, because it is smaller and I understand it's not, we're not talking about a big traditional high school, but just want to make sure that they're not behind from a technology perspective, because it's gotten so big that unfortunately a lot of kids just aren't prepared. So
Our kids learn how to use Google Suite. It's funny because I feel like for the kids, this is like, their native language. And they know it even better than some adults that we have coming in, knowing how to upload things, how to prepare presentations. So there'll absolutely be opportunities for those kinds of things. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, knowing how to use the technology to, make presentations or,
oh yeah, that's a big part of it. Yes, for sure. For sure.
And not only is that, I guess, taught, but I think that would be expected as part of the curriculum where, they
that's
would
what, yes.
Doing
and
that.
that's my assumption. Just, I mean, I'm old, right? So when I went to school, I was learning how to type, not I didn't have a laptop with me. So I know that it's much more integrated, but I would just want to make sure that would continue, even it being a smaller school, not having the resource availability of what you would have if you had, 1,000 high school students. So yes, that answers it. Thank you.
And that's kind of to piggyback on that a little bit, that's why I think the group collaborative work is also really essential, because it could be easy to say, oh, you're just going to do this online program, you're never going to talk to anyone, you're just going to, which would be a huge disservice to the learners, where, part of the collaborative learning is giving presentations to each other, learning how to public speak. All of those things are so critical for whatever someone's going to do after high school. And so kind of that chunk of the school day is spent on developing those skills, which of course kind of tie hands in hand with the computer skills.
And we do have a director of technology and innovation. In the past, some things that kids have done, they've worked on a podcast for an elective. They even things like helping to prepare the yearbook, and learning how to make a layout and upload things. Trying to think of some other technology, coding things.
And the eDynamic learning platform has tons of tech options. If, let's say, someone doesn't just want to learn the basics, but really wants to dive in, there's lots of coding options, tech app development, HTML, like a bunch of stuff that I personally don't even know much about, but that is a huge field that a lot of people are going into. So there are a lot of career pathways within that program that make sure that those more nuanced skills are also taught, if that's what someone wants to learn.
I have a question. In regards to like Montessori and homework, I see these kids in like public schools coming home with literally suitcases of literally suitcase filled with books, and they're spending 4 or 5 hours a day, and they don't get to, enjoy being outside and, playing and doing things because they're bogged down with 4 or 5 hours of homework every night. How does the Montessori work in regards to homework, especially like in high school?
So I can speak to the high school part, and then I'll let Jermaine speak to anything that comes below high school. But so the learners who use these programs at our school, they don't do homework, so they're able to cover what they need to within the school day. Now, the caveat to that is if a learner, let's say they refuse to focus and they refuse to get anything done during the school day, even if there's guide trying to support them and keep them on task, they can't actually force them to do the work. Then that's going to happen some other time, because, in order to graduate, you have to take the classes. But, I think when we set the pacing calendars for the students this year, they spend maybe 30 some minutes per class in order to finish it within the academic year. And as long as they're putting those 30 some minutes per class in during the school day, there's nothing that they need to do when they get home. We do have some families, let's say, who might travel for a week or two, and then maybe they have to do a little bit of catch up if it was during the school, week that they were traveling. But with the exception of those situations, really homework is at a minimum. And most of our learners do not do any once they get home.
Okay, I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, I to add that one thing we really value at Safety Harbor Montessori Academy is that, we do have families that travel. We do have kids who are involved in other things, whether it be dance or, maybe singing or Ninja Warrior, whatever it may be. We value those things. And so a program such as this allows kids to still excel in those areas, or to, have the opportunity to travel with their family, because there's so much that can be learned from those types of things. They'll be able to access their work wherever they are. So that's another really nice component to this program. And, they'll get what they need, but, we don't want them to be bogged down unnecessarily. If they're doing higher level things, they might have to put a little bit more work into it. But like I said, we're also valuing those other things that are really important, I think, at this stage in life. What other
just a quick question too, sorry. Continuing kind of on the work-life balance. I really appreciate the later start times and that my kids are able to get enough sleep. I'm wondering if that'll continue into high school as well, because I know a lot of high schools are starting at 7 a.m. I'm wondering if we're going to kind of keep the 8:30ish start time.
Yes, we will keep that. Because I agree. I think their natural clock um, is to start a little bit later. And so we do intend to keep a later start time when compared to some of the public schools that are
Yes.
start.
Great, thank you.
How much is going to be online or online-ish versus in person? Because it sounds like at least from the other program, a lot of it seems like it's an online type thing, and I'm just not sure how that translates for what SHMA is trying to do.
So it's the program is online in terms of like that is where the content is being delivered. But a lot of times, I mean, again, I have the model of the school that I work at to see what it looks like on a day-to-day basis. And there is constant communication with the guides all day long with peers. And so even though that content delivery is online first and foremost, there's plenty of opportunity for that kind of in-person learning support as well, coupled with all the other just like writing and apprenticeship and like those pieces that are just inherently in person. And when I had built the program for our current high school, I had played around with ideas that were more in-person based and didn't have that strong online component. And the issue I kept running into is that if we let learners learn at their own pace and we let them choose courses that are actually of interest to them, you have to have a huge high school in order to make that work online, or it has to be one-on-one teaching where you just have everyone has their own teacher. And this model enables that degree of flexibility in terms of choosing different language classes, choosing different science classes, choosing different elective classes, and doing them at a pace that feels comfortable so they don't have to go home and do lots of homework, let's say. And we found that these programs are the best way to try to pull the best parts of each type of learning, so that learners aren't isolated and feeling alone, but they're also not bored while everyone is learning the same thing right alongside their peers. And from the feedback we've gotten so far, both from current students and from parents, it works pretty well. People are pretty happy with it. And they love the lack of homework. And they love that if they do need to stay home or they do want to travel, they can also keep doing that and they can keep doing their learning without interruptions, or then without having to, have this whole stack of assignments when they get back. And so it tends to feel much more similar, I think, to in-person learning because of all those things set up to support the online program.
These are great questions. Are there any others? I should be checking the chat box too to make sure I'm not missing anything.
No, I've been looking.
Something that I didn't touch on in the presentation that I think is worth mentioning is how grading works in these programs. A lot of parents asked that question when they were starting out with our high school model. So we've set the minimum pass threshold to the program to 70%, which is a C. So if a learner's in this program, they legitimately cannot get lower than a C grade because the program will make them keep going with something until they kind of pass that 70% threshold. That's something a lot of the parents really liked in our program because they were like, we don't want our child getting lower than a C. So we like that threshold is set. But it's also a mastery-based program, which means if they want to keep going, let's say they get a 73 on something, and that's not the expectation that their family has or that they have for themselves. They can keep going and they can keep retaking a test with concepts that will raise that grade until they're happy with it. A lot of programs, it's a kind of a gimmick because they'll just give them the same test again. And like, that's not really testing mastery. That's like just testing how well they can remember what they answered before and change answers. This program does not ever repeat questions when given retests. So it really does give the opportunity for them to grow and master a topic before moving on to the next topic, which is helpful from a college perspective, but there's also a lot of evidence that shows that it increases confidence in learners when they actually master something before moving on to the next concept, whether it's math, whether it's science, whatever it is. And so kind of that 70% benchmark coupled with the sort of mastery-based model of the program is something both the learners and the families really appreciate. And no one ends up, doing it ad nauseum until they get super high scores, but it does give a little bit more of a fallback and a comfort, which in the era of just the stress and anxiety that's so rampant in high schools is a really nice piece. And something that is nice for me to see, because in the world of college advising, so many of my students are just so anxious and so stressed about every little grade. And this offsets it somewhat while still making sure that they have a grade-based transcript.
You see the question? Will there be any sports offered? Or will we partner with any other schools?
That is something that we hope to bring back. We did that before COVID happened. And then I think once that happened, some of the schools that we worked with went to, all boys or all girls. So we do hope to couple with some other schools. I think that was something really special that we did before. So that is something we want to build up again.
Have you ever found that, like, just in the past with a small high school, like smaller class sizes and stuff, that they're not as prepared to move, say, into college because they're not used to, having the student size, moving from classroom to classroom, things like that. I mean, I love the smaller idea, but I worry a little bit, like, will they have the experience that they need? Will it be such a transition going to college, for example?
So I could speak to that less from this, but more from kind of the college advising side of my background. And I've worked with students who are homeschooled, students who had a high school class of 10 kids, students who were at a high school of 2,000 kids. And I don't feel that size really correlates with how prepared they feel. I do think that students who are homeschooled have a hard time sometimes, just because the concept of just learning out of the home is really different for them. But once they're outside of the home and they're learning in a school of any sort, I find that they're perfectly ready to go, and it doesn't feel too overwhelming, because at a lot of colleges, you can still take some small classes. There's online learning, there's different options that they can kind of cater to what they learn best from. And actually, conversely, what I find is that students who aren't at those big schools actually are more successful in the college application process, because they're not trying to outcompete so many people, and they're not trying to stand out when there's 500 people that look virtually similar to them on an application. So often it's my students that come from really large schools that have the hardest time getting in because it's hard to stand out when there's tons of you, and it's a lot easier to have a unique application and to have unique perspectives on things when you're coming from something a little less traditional.
And I'd like to add to that, just from experience of coming from a smaller setting, there is that space that's provided for the learners to really be comfortable in who they are and to have that interaction one-on-one with adults. They're able to go anywhere and feel comfortable to approach, different resources in a college, in the job setting, to ask them, whatever's needed. So I think that having that opportunity and having that safe space really helps them as a whole person be successful.
And I second what Carrie's saying, because I've heard that over and over again. Even, I've heard that concern with our kids before we had the high school, going from our middle school to high school. And what I hear from the schools that they go to, or hear from the parents or the kids themselves, is just what Carrie was saying, that, they're not afraid to ask a question. They know the adults are there to help them. They are usually the leaders of a group. When they leave and go to another school, they're usually the ones that aren't afraid to, stand up and give a presentation if they're doing a group project. And I think that even though they come from a small setting, they learn what kind of people they want to be around. They have that confidence in who they are. They find their own little group, even within a bigger group, often when they when they move on to something that's bigger. So that's some of the feedback that I've heard over and over again. And so I would imagine, I can even speak from personal experience. My daughter went to Safety Harbor Montessori Academy all the way through 8th grade. She did go to a big public high school for one semester, and it was fine. You know, she did really well, but you know, I think she was expecting it to be something different, and I couldn't have told her that it was going to be different. She had to go see for herself. And then she did high school online, and you know, she didn't have any trouble getting into a university. And of course, lots of kids went to school online during COVID, but this was even before that she started that, and everybody was saying, oh, you know, what's going to happen? So this option, I wish we had available, because the one thing that was missing from what she did was having a group, you know, having that social interaction, you know, being guided in those other ways. That's the part that was missing. And that's, you know, something that we're able to offer now at Safety Harbor Montessori Academy. Is there anything else that you're wondering about? You don't have to be afraid to ask.
I do have one more question. Sorry, I keep asking questions. And I know this was something that we had talked about and I'd asked. In terms of things like additional resources like guidance counselors, like how would that work? Is that something that you guys are still looking at, or?
So we'll work together. Sarah's put together sort of a worksheet of the requirements. So we'll help kids pick the things that they need to graduate, and then let them know what things they have in terms of choices.
And as they kind of go through the high school years, you know, support will be given as needed for different parts of that process. So something that Carrie and I had looked into already is for Bright Future scholarships, for example. You know, what do we need to make sure that we're guiding learners to do so that they're eligible, you know, if academically they truly are eligible. Like, we don't want to inhibit that in any way. We want to support that process. So, you know, that's a big piece of it. And then from my college advising background, I've assembled kind of a pretty lengthy document that summarizes, you know, every step of the college application process, whether someone's going to a four-year, there you go, that's what it, there's the front. Whether someone's going to a four-year university, a community college, anything in between, you know, it guides them in pretty good detail, far more than I think what a public high school guidance counselor would ever have time to do. And then, you know, as we see gaps, and if, you know, something else comes up and parents are like, we don't know how to tackle this, we'll make sure that the support is there so that no one feels lost and everyone feels kind of ready for whatever comes after high school for them / their child.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we really know that that's an important piece. So we're definitely have that on our radar. Parents need, and again, from experience, parents need the resources, especially when you have, it's the first one going away to college or going away to, you know, whatever's next. So we want to provide that.
All right. Is there anything else before we wrap up? Checking the chat box. And if you think of things afterwards, Carrie,
I put my email in the chat.
Great.
So if you want to reach out.
You guys are still targeting one grade a year, right? So 9th grade next year, 10th grade year after?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool.
And if you guys think of questions about more curriculum specific stuff, Carrie will pass along to me anything that you guys are wondering about. I'm more than happy to be in touch and answer questions further if those arise at any point.
Yeah, and if you're from outside of the school and you want to come for a tour, you're welcome to do that too. You can use that email that Carrie put in the chat box. You can go to our website. You can sign up for a tour. We do have a portion of the website that's dedicated specifically to the high school. I can pull that up and pop that in the chat. Also, as I'm doing that, I just want to say thank you all so much for taking the time to join us tonight. It's really exciting for us because
It's really exciting.
I think from the beginning of time, people had said, "Oh, I wish you had a high school," and for a while, it's, yeah, we do too. And then as time went on, we said, "Yeah, but we just don't. It's just not going to happen." And so it's so magical that we're getting to really do it now. We're so excited. And kids who have gone through the program, like they've reached out when they've seen what's happening, and said they're so excited. You know, and parents of past students. So we're really happy that we're at this point, and we thank you guys for joining us tonight.
Thank you guys. And this is Sue. I was just going to comment too. This is Sue with a scratchy throat. But I just want to say too that I'm excited that the groundwork is happening for that core. And I'm excited to look as we extend and add more experiential and Montessori kind of outings, opportunities, service learning, and meaningful work in the community. I think we can learn a lot from established high school, Montessori high schools, not to do their model exactly, but to see how they implement that piece. So I'm excited that the core of what's needed in Florida and the flexibility and the the space and the community is started. So thank you for sharing more about it.
And for those of you who don't know Sue was with our school when it was first being built, and there was mounds of dirt in the parking lot that they were stepping over to get through the front door. So Sue has been one of those people who's seen the school really grow and really cares about the community, and one of those people that's super excited right along with us. So thank you.
Yes, and I did the middle school training in Houston with Betsy Coe, and I reconnected at the Model UN in New York just this past week with the girl that runs the high school there. So it's a nice community of people, and it's just exciting to see kids get what they need at their developmental age to be successful in our world. And I'll stop there because I know you're trying to wrap it up. Really excited. Thank you.
I'm excited too. We have the framework, and we really are happy we get to do what our community, do what our community needs. All right. Well, feel free to log out if you want to stay. We'll hang out for a few minutes if you have a more individual question. But have a good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.